All right, for this section, factoring trinomials of the type x squared plus bx plus c. Sometimes we call this ax squared plus bx plus c, or a equals 1. And when a equals 1, that just goes away. Okay? So these are not too bad to factor relative to the ones we'll do in the next section. So recall from the in-class examples that our strategy is to find, when the a is 1, is to find factors of 6, factors of this c term, so that they sum to the middle term. And I will almost always do a little factor tree. And so what are factors of 6 that sum to 5? Well, I've got 2 and 3, or 6 and 1. Well, 2 and 3, add to 5. So that's how it's going to factor. I mean, x squared only factors one way, x and x. And then 6, remember I had to have this to where they add up to 5. And recall you can check this. So we can do x times x is x squared. X times 3 is plus 3x. 2 times x is plus 2x. And 2 times 3 is 6. And those middle terms there add up to that 5x. That's why this sort of technique works. That's why I didn't pick 6 and 1. I would have gotten a middle term of 7x. Let me do another one. How about number 4? Okay, so factors here of 20, actually negative 20, that sum up to a negative 8. So you could list them all out. Once you get pretty good at these, you can kind of hone in on it. Looks like 10 and 2 would work. If what? So we know when it's negative here, the one factor is positive and one factor is negative. And so I've got to get a negative 8, so that's going to be a negative 10 and a positive 2. So that's my factoring. X minus 10, x plus 2. And I highly recommend checking these. It'll really help you develop an understanding of why this sort of undoing, the factoring works. So x times x is x squared. X times 2 is plus 2x. And then minus 10x minus 20. These two guys combine, x squared minus 8x minus 20. Okay, let me do one more. How about number 8? Number 8. So again, looking here for factors of negative 12 that sum to a positive 7. So when we know this factor is negative, we know that one factor has to be positive, one has to be negative. And so what are my factors here? So we got 6 and 2. And that's not going to work. I have 4 and 3. You may think that'll work, but again, one factor has to be positive and one factor has to be negative. So that's not going to work. And there's only one more, 12 and 1. But that's not going to work. So what do we know about this polynomial? Good. It is prime. Okay, so very similar, except we add one more element, and that is we're going to factor out a greatest common factor first. And really, we should always look for that. Whenever we are presented with binomials, trinomials, any sort of nomials, we want to, when we're asked to factor, we always look for a GCF. So let's just do number 11. Now we often want this first term positive, so it is. So what is common in all three terms here? Good, a 2. I'm going to pull that out. And then what do I have left? X squared plus 5x plus 6. And we already had an earlier section where that's all we did, and we were done. But now we have another tool in our tool belt, and we look here at this trinomial. Can we continue factoring that? Yes, we can. I'm going to factor x squared as x and x. And again, factors of 6 that sum to 5. And we've actually already done this one, right? If we look up here, number 1, notice this here is the same thing as number 1. So no surprise, we're going to have the same factoring, x plus 2, x plus 3. So there we go. Let me do another one. How about number 18? And recall I said that we often want this leading term to be positive. So what I recommend that you do is pull out a negative factor. In this case, what number goes into both negative 12, negative 48, and 36. So that's going to be a negative 12. I'm going to pull out a negative 12. And what do I have left? When I do that, I'm just going to have a t squared. Make sure you change that sign to plus 4t and then minus 3. Okay, so now we're looking at just this part right here, the factors of negative 3 that sum to 4. So you may think 3 and 1. That's not going to work though, because again, one factor has to be positive and one negative, and so we're not going to be able to do it. So that's as far as we can go. Wish it weren't like that because I wanted to show you. I mean, really, it's the same thing that we've done earlier. Let me do one more. Let's do another one with a negative factor. How about number 20? Okay, so what number goes into all three of those? Well, 9. And again, we have a leading term of negative, so I'm going to pull out a negative 9. What do I have left? B squared, change my signs, minus 4b, and then plus 3. Okay, so now what can I do? Again, factors of 3 to sum to negative 4. Well, this one is going to work if both factors are negative. Negative 3 times negative 1 is 3, and negative 3 plus negative 1 is negative 4. So that's going to work. Keep going here. So negative 9, b minus 3, b minus 1. That would be it. I recommend checking all these. We would FOIL that out and then distribute the negative 9 through, and we should get the original expression.